A hand closed around her arm and dragged her off the porch. Her bad leg buckled and she went down hard onto the gravel. The hand did not let go. It pulled her across the yard, knees scraping open, dress catching on stones. Men were laughing. Her father's laugh was loudest. She did not cry. She had stopped crying years ago. The dragging stopped. She looked up. 6 men stood chained in front of her. The strongest men on the place. Her father swayed above her with a glass in one hand. Brown liquor sloshed onto the dirt. "Pick one," he said. 5 of the men kept their eyes on the ground. One did not. His name was Isaiah. And what happened next in that yard, in front of those laughing men, would not be the joke her father had paid good liquor to enjoy. Stay with me on this one. Now let me tell you how she ended up on that gravel. Her name was Cora Whitfield, 22 years old, the only surviving child of Edmund Whitfield, who owned 1,200 acres of tobacco land in Buckingham County, Virginia, and 73 souls who worked it. By 1856, the soil was already going thin. The big plantations further south were the future, and everybody knew it. But Edmund had inherited the place from his father, and his father from his, and he was the kind of man who would burn a house down before he would sell it. He drank a lot. He owed a lot. He smiled like a man who had not slept in years. Cora's mother had died when Cora was 12. Fever took her in 3 days. After that, the house got quiet in a way that never lifted. The servants who worked indoors learned to walk soft. The clocks ticked. The father drank. The daughter limped from room to room with a book under her arm. The limp came from a horse. Cora was 7 years old when she rode out with her father one summer afternoon, and the horse spooked at a snake in the path, and Cora went off the saddle headfirst. She landed wrong. Her hip cracked. The doctor in Lynchburg said she would walk again, but she would not walk well, and she would not walk without pain. He was right on both counts. By the time she was a young woman, her left leg was a full inch shorter than her right. She walked with a hard tilt and a slow rhythm that made every step look like she was deciding whether to take it. On a cold morning, she could not get out of bed without help. On a wet evening, she could not sleep for the ache in the joint. She wore long skirts. She kept her hair pinned tight. She read everything in the house, then read it again. Edmund had once loved her. That was the part she remembered hardest. Before the fall, before the fever, he had been a man who came home in the evenings and lifted her up onto his shoulder and called her his little general. After the fall, something had moved in him. He still spoke to her. He still saw that she ate. But he had stopped looking at her straight. He looked at her the way a man looks at a debt he cannot pay. He started saying things in front of her. Little things at first. To his hunting friends, with a laugh. "Cora's not for the marriage market, gentlemen. She's for the bookshelf." Or, "I had a daughter once. Now I've got a librarian." The men would laugh because his voice told them they were supposed to. Cora would keep her face straight. She had learned to keep her face straight the way some people learn to play the piano. Hours of practice. Years. By 20, she had stopped going to the parties in Richmond. By 21, her father had stopped pretending. He told her one night, over supper, that he had written to her aunt in Charleston about a position as a governess. He said it like a man clearing his throat. She said, "All right, father." That was all she said. She finished her potatoes. She went up to her room. She did not come down for 2 days. The aunt in Charleston had not yet written back. That was the situation in the spring of 1856. Now let me tell you about Isaiah. Isaiah was 26. He had been born on the Whitfield place to a woman named Hattie, who still worked the kitchen, and a man named Solomon, who had been sold off to a Mississippi cotton man when Isaiah was 9 years old. Isaiah remembered his father. He remembered the morning Solomon was taken. He remembered his mother's face that day, and how it had set, and how it had never fully softened again. He was big. That was the first thing everybody said about him. Big in the shoulders, big in the arms, thick through the neck. By the time he was 16, he could lift a hogshead of tobacco onto a wagon by himself. By 20, he could pull a stump from packed earth with a rope around his chest and his feet braced and his breath coming slow. The overseer, Pritchard, used him for the work that broke other men. Isaiah did the work. He did not complain. He did not slow. But the strength was not why the other people on the place called him strong. They called him strong because he did not break. Pritchard had taken the lash to him 3 times by the time Isaiah was 20. Once for a missing tool. Once for being too slow leaving the field. Once for nothing anybody could name. Each time, Pritchard had wanted him to scream. He had not screamed. He had not made a sound past his teeth. He had stood after and walked to the cabins on his own legs, and not let anybody see his back for a week. After the 3rd time, Pritchard had stopped using the lash on him. There was no point. Isaiah took whatever a man could give and gave nothing back. There was something else about Isaiah, and only 3 people in the world knew it. He could read. Old Daniel had taught him. Old Daniel was a man who had come to the Whitfield place years before, bought from an estate sale up in Albemarle County, and old Daniel had once been the body servant of a planter who had let him learn his letters. It was against the law to teach a slave to read in Virginia by 1856. The law had been hardening for 30 years. Old Daniel had taught Isaiah anyway, by candle stub in the corner of a cabin, with a worn-out almanac and a torn page of scripture. He had taught him slow. He had said one thing every night they sat with the book. "Boy, if they find this out, they will hang me. Not sell. Hang. Do you hear me?" Isaiah had heard him. Isaiah had held the secret like a man holds a knife under his coat. The only other person who knew was his mother. So that was Isaiah. Big, quiet, carrying something inside him that nobody on the place could see. Now back to the porch and the men and the laughter. The visitors had come that afternoon. 2 of them. One was a cousin of Edmund's named Royston Whitfield, a Richmond lawyer who owned slaves himself and considered himself the better Whitfield. The other was a neighbor, a man named Birch, who farmed corn east of the river and was famous in the county for 2 things: drinking and being mean about it. They had come to talk about a loan Edmund was trying to put together. They had come to drink his liquor. By 4 in the afternoon they had drunk most of a bottle. By 5 they had drunk all of it and started a second. Cora had heard them from the upstairs hall. Their voices were the voices men use when they are saying things they will not remember in the morning. She had stayed in her room. She had been reading a translation of a Greek play, very old, very slow. Then she heard her name. She did not catch the sentence. Just her name, said in a tone she knew. Royston said it, and Birch laughed, and her father said something back that she could not make out, and Birch laughed again, harder. She closed the book. She listened. "You ought to put her to use, Ed," Birch said. His voice had carried up the stairwell. "You ought to do something with her. She's 22 years old, and you're feeding her like a hog you won't slaughter." "Hush now," Royston said. He was the better Whitfield, after all. "I'm just saying. There's no man in this county is going to take her. You know it. I know it. She knows it. I said hush. Marry her to one of your slaves, Ed. There's a joke for you." There was a silence then. Cora could hear it. It was the silence of a sentence that had landed too hard. She held the book against her chest. She did not breathe. Then her father laughed. Her father laughed, and Royston laughed, and Birch laughed loudest of all because he was the one who had said it. They laughed for a long time. They laughed the way men laugh when they have crossed into a room they did not mean to enter but discover they like. When the laughing died down, her father said, "Which one, then?" Birch said, "Pick the strongest. Make a real joke of it." Cora heard the chair scrape. She heard her father stand. She heard him call for the houseman, Joseph, and tell him to go to the overseer and have Pritchard bring up the strongest hands. "The chained ones. The buck ones," he said. He used that word. Cora set the book down. She rose from her chair. She walked to the top of the stairs. Her hip was bad that afternoon, bad from the damp. Each step on the stairs sent a knife through the joint. She held the rail. She came down. Her father was at the bottom of the stairs. He was waiting for her. "Father! Come on down here, daughter. Father, what are you doing? Come on down." She came the rest of the way. He took her arm at the bottom step. He did not look at her face. He pulled her toward the porch. She said, "Father." She said it again. He did not answer. On the porch, Royston was looking somewhere else. Birch was grinning. Her father got her to the edge of the porch. He let go of her arm long enough to step down himself. Then he reached back up and took hold of her again, and that was when she lost her footing, and that was when her bad leg buckled, and that was when she went down the porch steps and onto the gravel of the yard. The hand did not let go. The hand pulled her across the yard. Pritchard had come up from the quarters with 6 men chained at the wrists. They were the ones Edmund had asked for. 3 were from the field gangs. 2 were from the smithy. 1 was Isaiah. They had been told nothing. They had only been told to come. They stood there at the bottom of the slope, in their work clothes, with the chain running between them, and they looked at the ground. Pritchard stood behind them with his crop. Edmund pulled Cora to her feet in front of them. He swayed. The glass in his other hand was almost empty. He laughed once. He cleared his throat. "Gentlemen," he said. He said it to Birch and Royston. "May I present my daughter, Miss Cora Whitfield? Miss Cora is in the market for a husband." Birch hooted. Royston coughed into his hand. "Now," Edmund said, "since no gentleman of Buckingham County has seen fit to make an offer, I have decided to look elsewhere. Cora, pick one." She did not speak. "Pick one, daughter. Choose your husband. Make us proud." Birch laughed. "Choose," Edmund said. Cora stood in front of the 6 chained men. Her dress was torn at the hem. Her left knee was bleeding through the white cloth. Her hair had come down on one side. Her chest was rising and falling fast. She could not look at the men. She could not look at her father. She looked at the dirt between her shoes. The 5 men in front of her kept their eyes on the ground. They knew better than to look up. They had spent their lives knowing better than to look up. Isaiah was the one who looked up. He looked up at her face. Not at her body. Not at her father. Not at the lawyer or the corn farmer on the porch. At her face. And what he did in that next minute was not a thing the men laughing on the porch had paid for. He did not laugh. He did not grin. He did not make himself small, the way a slave is supposed to do in front of white men he does not know. He did not make himself big either. He just stood. He looked at her. And then, slow, without anybody telling him to do it, he took off his hat. It was an old hat. Straw. Half the brim gone. He took it off with his free hand, the one not bound in the chain, and he held it against his chest. He bowed his head. Just a little. Just enough to be seen. It was a courtesy. The kind of courtesy a man might give a lady at a dance. The kind of courtesy nobody had ever given Cora Whitfield in her life. Not a man, not a boy, not a cousin, not a neighbor. Nobody had ever stood in front of her and given her the gesture a woman is supposed to receive when she walks into a room. Cora looked up. She saw him do it. She saw the hat come off. She saw the head bow. Her face did something then she could not control. Crumpled just for a second. Just for 1 second. Then she got it back. She got it straight again. But Isaiah had seen the crumple. He had seen it land. Birch on the porch said, "Well, look at that. The buck thinks he's at a ball." Royston laughed, but it was an uncomfortable laugh now. The laugh of a man who realizes the joke has moved away from where he wanted it. Edmund did not laugh. Edmund had seen his daughter's face crumple. He had seen the slave bow. He had seen the thing pass between them. And it had not been the thing he had paid for. He swayed. He turned to Pritchard. "Take them back," he said. "Take them back to the quarters. The joke's done." Pritchard tugged on the chain. The 6 men turned. They walked back down the slope. Isaiah put his hat back on. He did not look at her again. He did not need to. Edmund stood there in the yard, breathing hard, the glass empty in his hand. Cora limped past him toward the house. She did not say a word. She went up the porch steps slow, one at a time, her hips screaming. She went past Birch, who was not laughing anymore. She went past Royston, who was looking at his boots. She went inside. She went up the stairs. She went to her room. She closed the door. She did not cry. Not then. That was what happened in the yard. But that was not the end of it. That night her father did not come up to her room to apologize. He never apologized for anything in his life. He drank until he passed out in the front parlor. Birch and Royston rode home in the dark. The house went quiet. In her room, Cora sat on the edge of her bed. She did not light a lamp. She sat in the dark. Her hip was singing. Her knee was throbbing under the bandage she had wrapped around it. She thought about the hat coming off. She had never been bowed to in her life. A man in chains had bowed to her in front of her own father. She turned that thought over for a long time. She turned it like a stone in her hand. She thought about what kind of man does a thing like that. A man with nothing. A man whose body is owned by another man. A man who knows that any gesture toward a white woman, anywhere, in front of anybody, can get him killed. She thought about what it had cost him to lift that hat off his head. Then, late in the night, she did cry. Quiet. So quiet the house would not hear her. She cried for a long time, sitting on the edge of her bed, in the dark. In the morning her father called her down to breakfast and acted as if the day before had not happened. That was his way. Things that happened in liquor did not exist by morning. He drank his coffee. He read his paper. He told her the weather was turning, and he hoped the corn would come up well, and would she please pass the butter. She passed the butter. She did not eat. After breakfast she went out to the back garden. She walked slow because of her hip. She walked past the kitchen, where Hattie was rolling out biscuits, and she did not look in. She walked along the side of the smokehouse, and along the boxwood hedge that her mother had planted long ago, and she stopped at the gate that led down toward the quarters. She did not go through the gate. She just stood there. She had not been down to the quarters since she was a child. White women on plantations did not go down to the quarters as a rule. The mistress, when there was a mistress, went sometimes to inspect, to see that the sick were tended, to bring a basket at Christmas. Cora's mother had done that. Cora was not the mistress. Cora had not been there since her mother had died. She stood at the gate. She thought about turning around. She did not turn around. She did not go through the gate either that morning. She just stood there for a long time, looking down the hill, at the row of low cabins where the smoke was rising thin against the May sky. Then she limped back to the house. She went up to her room. She sat at her writing desk. She took out a piece of paper. She wrote a single sentence on it, and then she crumpled it, and then she burned it in the candle. She wrote nothing else. That was the day after. By that evening her father had decided what he was going to do about the joke that had not landed. Edmund Whitfield was not a man who could leave a joke alone once it had failed. He was the kind of man who would tell the same joke louder and meaner until somebody laughed. His pride had been pricked the day before. The slave had bowed. The lawyer had looked at his boots. The corn farmer had stopped laughing. His daughter had walked past him with her face straight. He could not stand it. So at supper that night he announced his decision. "Cora," he said, cutting his meat, "I've been thinking about your situation. My situation. Your situation. About the difficulty of you. About what's to be done with you. There's nothing to be done with me, Father. There is, in fact. There is something to be done with you. I've decided you need a personal attendant." She set down her fork. "You walk poorly. You climb stairs poorly. You can't fetch a book off a top shelf. You drop things and you stoop poorly to retrieve them. It's been brought to my attention that you have struggled, and your struggle has been a poor reflection on this house. It has not been brought to your attention, Father. I have never asked for help. I'm giving you help anyway. I'm assigning you a man. She looked at him. Which man, father? The strongest one. The one you almost picked. Her hands went still on the table. I didn't pick him. You looked at him. He looked at me. There's a difference. You looked back, daughter. She did not answer that. Isaiah will be your personal attendant from tomorrow morning. He will accompany you on stairs. He will fetch what you cannot reach. He will be present in the house from dawn till supper. After supper, he returns to the quarters. Joseph will instruct him on his duties. Father, it's done, Cora. Father, you are continuing the joke. He looked at her then. He looked at her straight, for the first time in years, and his eyes were not drunk. They were cold. I am giving my crippled daughter a footman, he said. If anybody in this county wants to laugh at that, they can come laugh to my face. He went back to his meat. She sat at the table for a long time. She did not eat. After a while she rose. She limped up to her room. She did not slam the door. She closed it slow. She sat on the edge of her bed. She thought about Isaiah, down in the quarters that night, being told what his life would be tomorrow. Being told that he, the strongest man on the place, was to be made a houseboy for a crippled white woman. As a joke, as a punishment to her, as a punishment to him, as both. She thought about his mother hearing it, about what his mother must be feeling. She thought about him standing there at the bottom of the porch the day before, taking his hat off. She did not sleep that night, not for a minute. She watched the dark in her window turn slow to gray. She listened to the birds start up in the magnolia outside. When the gray went to pink, she got up. She washed her face. She dressed. She pinned her hair tight. She came down the stairs one slow step at a time. She went to the back porch. Isaiah was already there. He was standing on the bottom step. Joseph was beside him. Joseph was explaining the rules. Isaiah was listening with his hat in his hands. He did not look up at her when she came out. Joseph said, Miss Cora, this here is Isaiah. Your father has assigned him to you. He will follow your instruction. He will not speak unless spoken to. He will wait on the back porch when not in use. Is there anything you require of him this morning, Mississippi? She looked at Isaiah. He kept his eyes down. No, she said. Nothing this morning. Thank you, Joseph. Yes, Mississippi. Joseph went inside. The back door clicked shut. She stood on the porch. Isaiah stood on the step. A long time passed. A minute. 2. She said, Isaiah. Yes, Mississippi. Look at me. He did not look up. Look at me, please. He raised his eyes, just to her face, the way he had done in the yard. She said, I am sorry. He did not answer. He did not move. I am sorry that my father has done this. I am sorry for what he did yesterday. I did not ask for this. I do not want this. I do not want you to wait on me. I do not want you here. Not because of you, because of what he did. Do you understand me? He said, Yes, Mississippi. I will not give you anything to do. I will tell my father I have no need of you. I will get him to send you back to the field. He said nothing. Do you hear me? He said, Yes, Mississippi. She waited. She thought he might say something else. He did not. So she nodded once and she limped back into the house, and she went to her father's study, and she told him what she had decided. Her father listened. Then her father said, No. She said, Father, I do not want him. He said, I did not ask what you want, Cora. I told you what is going to happen. Isaiah is your attendant. He will remain your attendant. If you refuse to use him, he will stand on the back porch every day, doing nothing until my point has been made. He will stand there in the rain. He will stand there in the heat. He will stand there if it snows. The point will be made. Do you understand me? She understood him. She went back to her room. She sat at the window. She looked down at the back porch. He was still there. He had sat down on the bottom step. He was not moving. He was waiting. The sun came up over the magnolia. The day got warm. She watched him sit there, hour after hour, in the building heat, with his hat in his lap and his eyes on the dirt. By noon she could not stand it. She got up. She went down. She said his name. He stood. She said, "Come with me to the library. I have books to move." He said, "Yes, Mississippi." She did not have books to move. She had no books to move. She walked him to the library and she stood in front of the shelves and she said, "That one, the top shelf. The blue one." He reached up. He brought it down. She said, "Thank you." She pretended to look at it. She put it on her desk. She said, "Now this one, the brown one, 3 from the right." He brought it down. "Thank you." She made him bring down 9 books that afternoon. 9 books she did not need. She put them on her desk. She thanked him for each one. She felt foolish. She felt sick. She felt the heat of him standing 6 feet away from her. She felt his quiet. She did not know what else to do. At the end of the afternoon she said, "That's all for today. Thank you, Isaiah." He said, "Yes, Mississippi." He went back to the porch. He went back to the quarters at dusk. The next day was the same, and the next, and the day after that. He moved books for her. He carried her chair from one room to another when the light changed. He stood at the foot of the stairs when she came down them, because her father insisted, and she could not refuse, and she would put her hand on his arm to steady herself, and his arm was hard as a fence rail under her fingers. He never spoke unless she spoke first. He never met her eyes unless she told him to. He never gave her another bow. That was the thing. He never bowed again. The gesture in the yard had been one time. He did not repeat it. He did not perform it. He gave her her father's idea of service, exact and minimal, and nothing more. For a week she watched him close. She watched the way he moved through the house. The way he never touched anything he had not been told to touch. The way he held his elbows in tight when he passed through a doorway, as if his body knew it did not belong in those rooms and was apologizing for taking up the air. She watched the way his eyes went to the door whenever a board creaked, as if at any second somebody might walk in and find him there and decide he was where he ought not to be and reach for a strap. She watched him for a week, and then on the 8th day she said something to him she had not planned to say. It was a Tuesday. She had had him bring her 3 books, none of which she needed, and she was sitting at her desk with the books in front of her, and he was standing across the room near the door where he was supposed to stand. The afternoon light was coming in through the window. He had taken his hat off when he came in, and he was holding it against his chest. He had been holding it like that for 10 minutes. She said, "Sit down." He did not move. "Isaiah, sit down. There's a chair by the door." "I'm not to sit, Mississippi." "Says who?" "Says the rule. I am giving you a rule. Sit." He looked at her for the first time that day. Just a glance. He did not sit. "Isaiah, if somebody comes in, I will tell them I instructed you. If my father comes in, I will tell him I instructed you. Sit down. You have been standing for 3 hours." He sat. Slow. He sat on the edge of the chair like a man who does not want to commit to it. He kept his hat against his chest. He kept his eyes on the floor. She picked up a book. She opened it. She pretended to read. After a few minutes she said, without looking up, "What is your mother's name?" He did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "Hattie, Mississippi. Hattie. She cooks." "Yes, Mississippi." "How long has she been here?" "All her life, Mississippi." "Your father?" Pause. "Sold, Mississippi. When I was 9. She nodded. She kept her eyes on the page. She did not look at him. "Where to?" "Mississippi, Mississippi." "Have you ever had word?" "No, Mississippi." She turned a page. She had not read the one before it. "How old are you, Isaiah?" 26, Mississippi." You have brothers and sisters. Had a sister. Mississippi died when she was little. I'm sorry. He said nothing. She turned another page. My mother died when I was 12, she said. He said, Yes, Mississippi. I remember. She looked up. You remember. I was 13. I remember the house going quiet for a long time. I remember a lot of black at the front of the house. I remember your father not being seen for a week. She held the book very still. You saw all that. Everybody saw that, Mississippi. Everybody on the place. She set the book down. She did not know what to say to that. She had not thought, in any of the years since her mother's death, about who had seen. She had thought only of the inside of the house, the inside of her own room. She had not thought of the eyes outside the windows, the eyes down the hill, the eyes that watched the White family fall apart from the only angle those eyes were permitted to use. She said, I'm sorry for making you sit here moving books that don't need to be moved. I'm sorry for using you for nothing. I don't know what else to do. He did not look up. He said, I know, Mississippi. That was all he said. She did not give him another book to move that afternoon. They sat in her father's library for another hour, neither of them speaking, the light moving slow across the wood floor. When the clock struck 5, she said, You may go, Isaiah. He stood up. He bowed his head, just a little, just like the first time. He left. She did not move for a long time after. Something had started. That was the week. That was the setup. Now I'll tell you what happened next, because what happened next was the thing that changed everything, and not in the way you might think. The thing that changed everything was a book. It was the second week. Cora had given up on pretending she needed Isaiah to fetch books because she had begun to feel ashamed of it, and on Tuesday of that second week she had simply told him to sit in the library while she worked at her desk, and he had sat and she had worked. She was translating a piece of Latin. Her mother had taught her Latin as a girl before the fever. Cora was not gifted at it, but she liked it the way she liked any puzzle that needed to be done slow. She was working through a passage in Tacitus. She had 3 books open on her desk. The Latin, a dictionary, a book of grammar. She was stuck on a verb form. She said it aloud, the way she sometimes did when she could not figure something out. She said the Latin. She frowned at it. She turned the page in the grammar. Across the room, Isaiah said something. He said it very quiet, so quiet she was not sure she had heard it. She said, What? He kept his eyes on the floor. He said, It's a perfect passive participle, Mississippi, with the auxiliary, some, est. She put the book down. She turned in her chair. She looked at him. He did not look at her. He was looking at the floor. He had gone very still. He had spoken without thinking, and now he was very still, the way a deer goes still in a clearing when it realizes it has been seen. She said, Isaiah. He did not answer. Isaiah, look at me. He did not look up. Isaiah, do you read Latin? A long silence. No, Mississippi. You just translated a verb form. No, Mississippi. I did not. You said it was a perfect passive participle, with some est. You said that. He did not answer. Isaiah. He raised his eyes. The look in them was the look of a man who has stepped on a thin board over a deep well. There was no expression on his face. There was only the calculation behind the face, the arithmetic of how much he had just given away, and to whom and what it could cost. He said, Miss, I beg you to forget I spoke. She stared at him. She said, You can read. He said, Mississippi, please. You can read Latin. Mississippi. They will hang me. They will hang the man who taught me. He is an old man. He is in the quarters at this moment. He is 67 years old. He has done nothing to nobody. They will hang him. She set down the grammar book. She got up from her chair. She walked over to him. Her hip was bad, but she walked. She stopped 2 feet in front of him. He did not stand. He was sitting on the chair by the door, his hat against his chest, and he had gone gray. His skin had gone gray. She said, "Isaiah, look at me." He looked at her. She said, "I am not going to tell anybody." He did not move. "Do you hear me? I am not going to tell anybody. Mississippi. With respect, Mississippi. You're saying that now. I'm saying it forever. With respect, Mississippi. I do not know you. I have known you for 2 weeks. I do not know you. Then I will show you." "How?" She did not have an answer right away. She stood there. She thought. She said, "I will keep your secret. I will keep his secret. And I will keep something of my own with you, so that if you fall, I fall." He said, "Miss, there is nothing of yours that can fall the way I can fall." She knew that was true, but she thought about it anyway. She stood there in front of him and she thought about it. After a long minute she said, "Wait here. Do not move." She went out of the library. She went up the stairs, slow. She went to her room. She opened her desk. From the bottom drawer she took a small leather book. It was her diary. She had kept it for 4 years. She had written in it things she had never said aloud to any living person. She had written in it things about her father that, if he ever read them, he would burn the house down with her in it. She brought the diary downstairs. She came back into the library. She put it on the small table next to Isaiah. "Open it," she said. He did not. "Open it, Isaiah. Read a page. Any page." He did not move. "Read it. Read a page, so you know what's in there. So you know what would happen to me if my father saw it." He looked at the book. He looked at her. Slow, careful, like a man reaching toward a snake, he picked it up. He opened it to a page near the middle. He read. She watched him read. She watched his face change. He read for a long time. Not the whole book. 1 page. Maybe 2. He closed it. He set it back down on the table. He said, "Mississippi." She said, "Now we both know. Now we both have something to lose." He was quiet for a long time. He said, "Why?" She did not answer right away. She said, "Because nobody has ever read what I wrote down. Because nobody knows what I think. Because everybody in this county thinks I am a piece of furniture. Because 3 weeks ago you took your hat off in front of me when nobody else has ever taken a hat off in front of me, in my whole life. Because I am tired of being alone in a house where nobody hears me. That is why." He looked at her then, straight. He said, "Mississippi, cannot be your friend. Do you understand? I cannot. There is no world where I can be your friend. You are a white woman. I am a slave. There is no version of those 2 things that ends with us being friends. Do you hear me?" She said, "I hear you." He said, "Then why have you given me your book?" She said, "Because I want there to be one person, somewhere on this earth, who knows what is inside my head before I die. And because you are that person, whether either of us wants it or not. You did the bowing. You did the reading. You did the speaking. You did it. I did not." He closed his eyes. He did not open them for a long time. When he opened them, he said, "All right, Mississippi." "All right what?" "All right, we both have something to lose. Same as you said." She nodded. She took the diary back. She held it against her chest. She said, "Tell me what you have read. In your life. What books?" He said, "Almanacs, Mississippi. 3. A Bible. A book of Psalms separate from the Bible. A pamphlet that came up from Philadelphia. Part of a newspaper. Torn page of a play. Some letters of a man named Phyllis Wheatley." Phyllis Wheatley was a woman. "Yes, Mississippi. I know that. I said letters of, not letters by, letters about." "Oh, and 1 book about a man named Frederick Douglass." She knew that name. Everybody in Virginia knew that name. Frederick Douglass was the most dangerous name a slave in the South could know. She said, "Who gave you that book?" I cannot say, Mississippi. All right. She sat down across from him. Slow, with her hip protesting. She sat down in the chair by the bookcase. She held the diary in her lap. She said, "Will you read to me? Sometime." He said, "Mississippi. Sometime. Not now." He said, "Mississippi, listen. If anybody walks in this room and finds the two of us sitting like this, just sitting, just talking, not even reading, just this, they will not need to hear a word we have said. They will hang me. Do you understand? They will hang me on a tree behind the smokehouse, and they will leave me there for a week to teach the others a lesson. Do you understand? I am not exaggerating, Mississippi. This is what happens. This is how it happens. To me, not to you. To me." She understood. She had not understood until that moment. Not really. Not all the way. She had known it the way one knows the weather. She had not known it the way Isaiah knew it, which was the way one knows the inside of one's own house. She said, "Then we have to be careful." He said, "Mississippi, there is no careful enough. Then we will be the most careful that two people have ever been." He looked at her a long time. He looked at her the way a man looks at a person he is just now seeing for the first time. Not the way he had looked at her in the yard. Different. He looked at her like she was a problem he was going to have to solve over the rest of his life. He said, "All right, Mississippi." He stood up. He put his hat back on. She said, "Isaiah." He stopped at the door. "You don't have to call me miss when there's nobody to hear it. Not in this room. Not when it's just us." He stood at the door for a long second. Then he said, "I will think about that, Mississippi." He went out. She sat in the library for a long time, holding her diary against her chest. The light moved across the floor. The clock on the mantel ticked. Down in the kitchen, somebody, probably Hattie, dropped a pan, and somebody else laughed, and a dog barked once outside the window and then stopped. For the first time in 14 years, since the fever had taken her mother, Cora Whitfield was not alone in the world. That is the thing that scared her most. Because the thing you fear most when you have been alone for a long time is not being alone anymore. Because as soon as you are not alone, you have something to lose. And Cora Whitfield, sitting in her father's library on a May afternoon in 1856, had just realized that the man across the room was, in fact, a thing she could lose. And not in the slow way that things are lost over years by drift and time and forgetfulness. He could be lost in a single morning, on a rope, behind a smokehouse. He could be lost in a single afternoon, on a wagon south with a chain at his neck. He could be lost in less time than it took her to walk down a flight of stairs. She had not known she could be afraid like this. That fear is the thing the rest of this story is going to be about. Now let me tell you what happened next. Because what happened next is when the joke stopped being a joke and started being a question. And the question was being asked by a man in Richmond who had been thinking about Edmund Whitfield's daughter for 2 weeks. The man in Richmond was Royston Whitfield, the lawyer, the better Whitfield, the one who had laughed on the porch and then looked at his boots. Royston had ridden home that night and not been able to sleep. He had thought about what he had seen. He had thought about the slave bowing. He had thought about Edmund's face. He had thought, most of all, about his cousin's daughter. Royston was 48 years old. He had a wife in Richmond and 3 sons, all grown. He had a house on Franklin Street with brass on the door. He owned 11 souls. He sat in a pew on Sunday and put money in the plate. He was, by every measure of his county, a respectable man. He was also a man who had been thinking, for some time now, about how to take the Whitfield land. Edmund's debt situation was not a secret. Half of Richmond knew it. The plantation was mortgaged in 3 directions. The crop had been bad for 2 years. The slaves were aging, and the strongest field hands were going to need to be sold soon to cover the interest. Royston had been waiting. He had been a patient man. What he had seen on the porch that day had given him an idea. If Cora Whitfield were to marry a respectable cousin, the Whitfield land would stay in the Whitfield name. Royston was a Whitfield. Royston was also a widower as of the previous November. His wife had died of a stomach complaint in the autumn. He had not yet announced any plans. He had not been planning anything until that afternoon on the porch. But he had ridden home thinking, by the time he crossed the James, that there was no man in Virginia who would marry Cora Whitfield as she was. No man, except a cousin who needed the land and could swallow his pride for it. A cousin who could present it as charity. A cousin who could play the magnanimous savior of his crippled niece. A cousin who could, within the year of marriage, find himself the legal owner of 1,200 acres of Buckingham County tobacco land. By the time he reached his house on Franklin Street, Royston Whitfield had decided he would marry Cora. He wrote a letter that night. He did not send it. He held it for 2 weeks. He wanted Edmund to feel the pinch a little more before he made the offer. He wanted Edmund to be grateful. 3 weeks after the porch incident, Royston sent the letter. The letter arrived at Whitfield Hall on a Wednesday morning in early June. Edmund read it at the breakfast table. He read it twice. He set down his coffee. He said, "Cora." She looked up. "Your cousin Royston has made an offer of marriage." She did not understand him at first. "What?" "Royston, the lawyer, the one who was here in May. He is offering for your hand. He is a widower. He has a house in Richmond. He has 3 grown sons. He has asked, given the difficulty of your situation, whether the family might be willing to entertain his proposal." She stared at him. She said, "He is your cousin, second cousin, once removed. He is twice my age. He is 48. You are 22. That is a wholly respectable difference. Father, Cora, you are going to send me to Richmond, to marry your cousin. I am going to send you to Richmond, daughter, to marry a man who has agreed to take you as you are. There is no other offer on this table. There has not been an offer on this table in your whole adult life. There will not be another." She set down her fork. She said, "And if I refuse?" "You will not refuse. And if I do?" "Cora, I have been honest with you about your situation. There is no future for you in this house. I am sending you to your aunt in Charleston, or I am sending you to your cousin in Richmond. Those are the choices. I am giving you the choice between a teaching position and a marriage. Take the marriage. It is the more dignified outcome." She stared at him. She said, "When?" "The wedding is to be in the fall. Royston will come down in August to make it formal. The arrangement is to be signed by the end of the month. The wedding in October. You will live in Richmond beginning in November. And the house here, the land." He did not answer that. She said, "Father, the land, what happens to it?" He picked up his coffee. He did not look at her. He said, "That is not your concern, daughter." That was when she understood. He was selling her for the debt. Royston had not offered for her out of any kindness. Royston had offered for her because he was going to get the land. Edmund had accepted because Royston was going to clear the debt. The 2 cousins had done their figures. The figures included her. She did not say anything else. She finished her breakfast. She went up to her room. She sat at her desk. She wrote a single line in her diary, and she crossed it out, and she wrote nothing else. At 10 o'clock that morning she went down to the library. Isaiah was already there. He was sitting on the chair by the door, his hat in his lap. He had been told nothing. She closed the library door behind her. She said, "Isaiah, I am to be married, in October, to my father's cousin, in Richmond." He did not move for a long moment. Then he stood up. He bowed his head, the way he had done in the yard, the way he had done that first day on the back porch. He bowed his head, just a little, just enough. He said, "Congratulations, Mississippi." She started to cry. She had not meant to. She had told herself she would not. But the moment he bowed his head and said that word, she started to cry, and she could not stop. She sat down in the chair by the bookcase. She put her hands over her face. She cried hard. She cried the way a person cries who has been keeping it back for years. Isaiah did not move. He could not. He could not come to her. He could not touch her. He could not put his hand on her shoulder. He could not sit beside her. He could not even cross the room. If anybody had walked in at that moment and found a slave with his hand on the shoulder of a white woman who was weeping in her father's library, what came next would not be a question. It would be a rope. So he stood, 6 feet away, with his hat in his hands, and he let her cry. After a long time she stopped. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She did not look at him. She said, "He is going to take the land. That is why he is marrying me. He is going to take the land and he is going to sell off the people. He is going to send Hattie south. He is going to send old Daniel south. He is going to send you south. That is what he is going to do, Isaiah. Because the land is mortgaged and he is a Richmond lawyer and he knows what land like this is worth and what it is not worth. And he knows the only thing on this place that has any cash value right now is the souls. Do you understand?" Isaiah said, "Yes." He did not say miss. That was the first time. He said, "Yes, I understand." She looked up at him. He was looking at her. Straight. Not the bowed head. Not the eyes on the floor. He was looking at her face. He said, "How sure are you of this?" "I am sure." "How sure?" "My father will not look at me when I ask him about the land. He has not looked at me when I have mentioned it twice this morning. He looked at his coffee. He looked out the window. He did not look at me. I have known my father all my life, Isaiah. I know when he is hiding a thing. He is hiding this." Isaiah looked at the wall behind her for a moment. He was not seeing the wall. He was seeing something else. He was doing arithmetic in his head, the kind of arithmetic a man does when he is figuring out which of the people he loves is going to be taken from him first, and where they will be sent and how he might find them again and how he will not. He said, "My mother." She said, "Yes, they will sell my mother. Yes, I am sure they will. Royston is not sentimental. Hattie is 62. She is worth less than a younger woman, but she is not worth nothing. She cooks. They will sell her to a townhouse in Richmond if she is lucky, and to a road gang in North Carolina if she is not." He closed his eyes. He stood there a long time. When he opened them he said, "Mississippi." She said, "Don't." "What?" "Don't call me Mississippi. Not now. Not for this." He did not call her anything. He said, "There is a thing I want to ask you. I do not know if I have the right to ask it." "Ask it." He looked at her. He said, "Are you going to marry him?" She did not answer for a long time. She said, "No." "How?" "I do not know yet. I have known about this for 2 hours. I do not know yet. But I will not. I will not marry him. I will not. Because if I marry him your mother goes south and old Daniel goes south and you go south, and the only reason I would be marrying him is to save my father, and my father has not earned saving. Not for me. Not for this." Isaiah said nothing. She said, "You don't believe me." He said, "Mississippi, I have lived my life. I have lived 26 years. I have watched white people decide many things in many rooms. I have watched them decide them in the morning and unmake them by night. I have watched them swear by God and break it by Sunday. I am not calling you a liar. I am telling you what I have seen. I will not break it. I have heard that too." She looked at him. She said, "Then watch me." He said, "I will. I will watch you. I will watch you very close." That was the day the joke stopped being a joke. That was the day it became a question. The question was, would the crippled daughter who had been given to the strongest slave as a joke do something so far outside the joke that the joke could not survive it? The question was, could she? The next 2 weeks would tell. She did not eat much. She sat at her desk for hours, looking out the window. She did not write in her diary. She wrote, instead, on loose paper, which she burned at the end of each night. She wrote her thoughts. She wrote her plans. She wrote, then she burned. She wrote, then she burned. She did not tell Isaiah what she was doing. He came to the library every day. He sat in the chair by the door. They did not speak much. Sometimes she would say something, and he would answer with one word. Sometimes she would say nothing, and he would say nothing. The silences were not empty. They were full of two people thinking about the same thing at the same time, and knowing it and not saying it. On the 11th day after Royston's letter, she stood up from her desk and said, "Isaiah." He looked up. She said, "Tell me about old Daniel. Mississippi. Tell me about him. He is the man who taught you." "Yes. Tell me about him." Isaiah did not want to. She could see it in his face. He had spent his life keeping old Daniel a secret. He had carried that secret since he was a boy. He did not want to lift any part of it. She said, "Isaiah, I am asking. I am not commanding." He looked at her for a long time. He said, "Old Daniel is 67. He came to this place when I was 11. He was sold from an estate up north. He had served a planter who let him learn his letters. He has a bad knee. He cannot work the field anymore. He weeds the kitchen garden and he watches the chickens. He does not have a wife. He had one before he came here. She is not living. Do you trust him?" "I trust him with my life. He has had my life in his hands every day for 15 years. He has not dropped it." She nodded. She said, "I am going to need to speak with him." Isaiah was silent. "Isaiah, I am going to need to speak with him. Before the end of this month. Privately. I cannot go down to the quarters. I cannot have him brought up to the house. I need you to figure it out. Can you?" He said, "Why?" "Because old Daniel is going to know things you do not know. Because he came from up north. Because he was sold once. Because he has been farther in this world than you have, Isaiah, with respect, and I need to talk to a man who has been farther." "What is it you want to ask him?" "Routes." He went still. He said, "Mississippi." She said, "Routes. North. Out of Virginia. Up to Pennsylvania. Up to New York. Up further. I want to know what he knows. I want to know who he knows. I want to know what he has heard." "Mississippi." "You cannot ask him that." "I can ask him that." "Mississippi." If he were heard answering that question. If anybody heard him say one word about a route. If a child overheard him. If somebody saw him talking to me. If somebody saw him talking to you. He is dead. You understand that? Dead. Hanged. I know. Then why? She looked at him. She said, "Because I am going to send you north." Isaiah did not move. She said, "All of you, or as many as want to go. I am going to send you north before the wedding. I am going to use what I have. I am going to use what little I have. I am going to do it before October. I am going to do it before Royston puts his name on this place. I am going to do it before he can sell anyone south." Isaiah said, "Mississippi." She said, "Listen to me, Isaiah. I have been thinking about this for 11 days. I have not slept. I have not written anything down. I have been turning it. And I have decided. I cannot stop my father from selling me to his cousin. I cannot stop the marriage. I cannot save myself. But I can do this before they finish me. I can do this. And I will." He shook his head. Slow. He shook it the way a man shakes his head at something he does not believe his ears have heard. He said, "You do not understand what you are saying." "Tell me, then." "You do not understand what happens to a white woman who is found helping a slave run." "What happens?" "Mississippi. With respect. I do not know all of what happens because I am not a white woman, and I have not seen the thing happen, but I have heard. I have heard. They put a woman like that in a prison. Or they send her away. Or they marry her off to the worst man they can find and bury her in another county. They do not let her stay in any house she knows." "All right. All right is not an answer to that, Mississippi. It is my answer. Mississippi. Isaiah. I am going to be sent to Richmond in November. I am going to be married to my father's cousin in a church in October. I am going to live in his house. I am going to bear his children if my body will allow it, which I doubt. I am going to die in that house, slow in 20 years, with nothing of my own and nothing I have done and nothing I have been. That is the life waiting for me at the end of this summer. If I do this thing and if I am caught, the worst that can happen to me is to be sent to a prison or buried in a worse county. The worst that can happen to me is not very different from what is already going to happen to me. Do you understand? It is different, Mississippi. Not different enough. Different enough. Not to me. Not to me, Isaiah. Look at me. Not to me. He looked at her. He said, Mississippi, I think you are a brave woman. I am not. You are. I think you are. But I think you are also a woman who has not yet been in a room with a man who is going to hurt you. I think you have been in rooms with men who have hurt you with words. I think you have been in rooms with your father. But I think you have not yet been in a room with a man who is going to put a hand on you. And I am afraid for you. I am afraid for you in a way I have not been afraid for anyone besides my mother. She did not answer that. She could not. After a long minute she said, Will you help me? He did not answer for a long time. Then he said, Yes. Will old Daniel? I will ask him. Will you ask him tonight? I will ask him tonight. She nodded. She said, Thank you, Isaiah. He said, Don't thank me yet. That was the 11th day. That was the day everything started. The next 3 weeks were the strangest weeks of Cora Whitfield's life. On the outside, the house ran the way it had always run. Edmund drank in his study. Royston wrote letters from Richmond about wedding arrangements and the names of the witnesses he intended to bring. Hattie cooked in the kitchen. Pritchard rode the rows. The tobacco came up in the fields. The world kept doing what the world did. On the inside, in the library, on the back porch, in the kitchen garden after dark, Cora and Isaiah and old Daniel were building something. Old Daniel had agreed. Isaiah had brought her his answer 2 nights after she had asked. Isaiah had said, He says he will help. He says he has waited 15 years for somebody white to ask him this question. He says he did not think he would live to be asked. He says he knows the routes. He says he knows 2 men who can move people across the Pennsylvania line. He says he needs 40 days. He says it will take 40 days to set. She had said, I do not have 40 days. How many do you have? 8 weeks. Until the 1st of August. After that my father will have Royston down for the contract signing. After that the house will be watched. After that there will be no time. Isaiah had nodded. He said, Then 40 days. Old Daniel can do 40 days. 40 days from tonight is the 18th of July. The night of the 18th. If we are going then. She said, All right. It cannot be all of us. I know. It can be 6, maybe 7. More than that we cannot move. More than that and they catch us in the 1st county. Pick them. Old Daniel will pick them. He knows who has the legs and who does not. He knows who has talked too much in the cabins and who has not. He will pick them. He will not tell them until 3 days before. All right. My mother. Yes. My mother will go. Yes. And I will go. She looked at him. She had known he would go. She had known it from the moment she had said the word. She had not let herself look at it. Now she looked at it. She said, Yes, you will go. He said, I will not see you again after. She said, No, you understand that. Yes. He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. He looked at her the way a man looks at a person he is memorizing. He said, Why are you doing this, Mississippi? She had answered that question once. She did not answer it the same way the second time. She said, Because I was given to you as a joke, and you bowed, and nobody else in my life has ever bowed. and I owe you for that. I owe you for that for the rest of my life. And this is what I have. I have this one thing. This is what I can give back." He said, "Mississippi." I bowed because you looked like a person in front of a room full of men who were treating you like a dog. I bowed because I knew what that felt like. I know. I did not bow for you to owe me. I know that too." He shook his head, slow. He said, "All right." She said, "All right." The 40 days began. Old Daniel did his part. He worked through Isaiah, and Isaiah worked through Korah, and Korah kept the house running as if nothing had changed. She read at her desk. She walked in the garden. She wrote letters to her aunt in Charleston that meant nothing. She had supper with her father. She listened to him talk about the wedding. She nodded. She passed the butter. The hardest thing was that Isaiah could not come to the library every day anymore. Old Daniel needed him at the cabins in the evenings, talking to men, listening, making arrangements. Korah had to find a reason to keep him on the back porch some days, then dismiss him early so he could go. She told her father that Isaiah was becoming insolent and she did not want him in the library. Her father had laughed and said he had told her so, and she had let him have the laugh, and she had used the lie to free Isaiah's evenings. She did not write in her diary anymore. She had burned it. She had taken it down to the kitchen one night and burned it in the stove, page by page, watching her own handwriting curl and brown and lift up the flue. There could be nothing in the house that could be found after. Nothing. Not a line. The money was the other thing. She needed money. The escape needed money. Boats had to be paid for. Drivers had to be paid for. A man in Petersburg who would forge a pass for a free black woman had to be paid for. She did not have money of her own. She had jewelry. Her mother's jewelry. A pearl necklace, a brooch, 2 rings, a pair of earrings, and a gold bracelet that had been her grandmother's. The jewelry was in a small case in the bottom drawer of her dressing table. Her father did not know it was there. He had forgotten it years ago. She had not. She took the jewelry to Isaiah on the 23rd day. She put it in his hand in the library. She closed her hand around his. She said, "This will cover everything. Old Daniel will know where to take it. Sell it in Petersburg. Sell it in Richmond. Sell it through whatever channel he has. Do not sell it in this county." He held the case. He did not open it. He said, "Mississippi, this is your mother's." "Yes, Mississippi. My mother is not in this case. My mother is in my head, and my mother is in my hands, and my mother is in what I am doing right now. My mother is not in this case. Take it." He took it. He said, "All right." He left the library. 20 days later, on the night of July 18th, 1856, the thing happened. The plan was simple, the way such plans must be. The plan was that at 1 in the morning, when the house was asleep and Pritchard was drunk in his cabin at the edge of the quarters, 7 people would walk out of the Whitfield place and not come back. Old Daniel was one. Hattie was one. Isaiah was one. A young man named Samuel, a friend of Isaiah's. A young woman named Ruth, who was Samuel's wife. A man named Levi, who had a wife on a place across the river but had been promised by old Daniel that they would come back for her on the next run. And a boy named Caleb, 14 years old, an orphan, the strongest legs in the quarters. 7. Old Daniel had said 7 could move. 8 was too many. He had picked the 7 and he had stuck to it. There had been hard nights in the quarters about it. There had been people not picked who would weep for the rest of their lives. He had picked. Korah's job in the plan was simple. She was to do nothing. She was to be asleep in her bed. She was not to come down. She was not to be seen. If she was caught helping, the run would fail because nobody would believe a white woman had helped of her own accord. They would say she had been seized and forced. They would say the slaves had taken her. They would hang every man on the place to be sure they had got the one who had touched her. She had agreed to that. She had agreed to do nothing. At 12:40 in the morning, She did the thing she had agreed not to do. She got out of bed. She put on her shoes. She put on a shawl. She lit no candle. She walked to the back stairs. She walked down them slow, her hips screaming, one hand on the rail. She went through the kitchen. She went out the back door. She closed it behind her without a sound. She went around the side of the house. She went to the magnolia at the edge of the backyard. She waited. She could see down the slope to the quarters. There was no light in the cabins. There was no sound. The night was warm and the cicadas were going. There was a thin moon, no more than a fingernail. At 1 o'clock, she saw them. 7 shapes. Moving along the back of the smokehouse. Moving toward the woods. Moving slow in a line with one man in front, who she knew without seeing was Isaiah, and one man in back who she knew without seeing was old Daniel. They were going to pass within 20 feet of the magnolia. She stepped out from behind the tree. The line stopped. For one long second, the 7 of them stood frozen, looking at her. She could see the shapes of their faces in the moonlight. She could see Hattie clutching a bundle. She could see old Daniel with his bad knee. She could see Samuel's hand going to a knife at his belt. She could see Isaiah at the front, his arms loose at his sides, and his face very still. She did not speak. She lifted her hand. She made the small gesture, the bow, the way he had bowed to her in the yard, the way he had bowed to her on the back porch. She lowered her head, just a little, just enough. Isaiah stood for a second. Then he raised his hand. He raised his hat. He lifted it off his head. He held it against his chest. He lowered his own head, just a little, just enough. He put the hat back on. He turned. The line moved. The 7 of them disappeared into the dark at the edge of the woods. She did not cry that night. She did not cry standing under the magnolia. She did not cry walking back up to the house. She did not cry climbing the stairs. She did not cry getting into bed. She lay in the dark. She listened to the cicadas. She listened to the house. She thought about Isaiah walking through the woods, and she thought about Hattie's bundle, and she thought about old Daniel's bad knee, and she thought about the boy named Caleb who was 14 years old and an orphan. She thought about the bow. The discovery came in the morning. Pritchard had ridden out at 5, the way he always did, to see who was in the field and who was not. By 5:30 he was riding hard back to the house. By 6 he was at the back door, shouting for Edmund. By 6:15 Edmund was on the porch in his nightshirt, with his face red and his hands shaking, listening to Pritchard say the words. 7 gone. 7. What? Gone. Tonight. 7 of them. The old man. The cook. Isaiah. 3 from the gang. The boy. Edmund turned. He saw Cora at the top of the stairs in her dressing gown. He said, "Get back in your room." She said, "What is happening, father?" "Get back in your room. Pritchard. Get the dogs. Get the men. Send a rider to Royston. Send a rider to the patrols. Move." Pritchard moved. By 8 in the morning there were 11 men on the place. By 9 there were dogs. By 10 there were 2 patrols out on the roads going north. By 11 Royston was riding down from Richmond. By 2 in the afternoon the patrols had come back with nothing. By evening they had still come back with nothing. By morning they had come back with nothing. By the second morning, when Royston arrived in his black coat and his hard face, they had come back with nothing. Old Daniel had picked his men well. Old Daniel had picked his routes well. Old Daniel had used Cora's mother's jewelry well. The 7 were across the river by the morning of the discovery. They were in a wagon by the next night. They were on a boat by the 3rd day. By the time the patrols had given up, the 7 were already past the Maryland line, and a different set of hands had taken over the moving of them, and the Whitfield patrols would never find a thread to pull. Royston Whitfield sat in Edmund's parlor on the 3rd morning and asked his questions. Edmund was drunk by then. He had been drunk for 2 days. He was talking too much. He was crying. He was saying the family was finished. He was saying the place was finished. He was saying he was ruined. Royston was not drunk. Royston was thinking. Royston had been a lawyer for 26 years. He had cross-examined many people. He had a feel for when a thing did not fit. And one thing in this thing did not fit. A house slave does not run with a kitchen woman and an old man and 3 field hands and a boy without somebody on the inside knowing. Somebody had known. Somebody in the house had known. Somebody in the house had to have known, because Isaiah had been in the house every day for 2 months, and the only person in the house Isaiah had been with regularly was the daughter. Royston said, "Where is Cora?" Edmund said, "In her room. Bring her down. She has nothing to do with." "Bring her down, Edmund." Edmund called for Joseph. Joseph went up. Joseph came down with Cora. She was in a dark dress. Her hair was pinned. She walked into the parlor and stood in front of her cousin. Royston said, "Sit, Cora." She sat. Royston said, "Cora, you will tell me what you knew about this." She said, "I knew nothing about this." "Cora, I knew nothing. You spent every day for 2 months in a room with the man who ran. You will tell me what you knew." "I knew nothing. He was assigned to me as a footman. He moved books. He did not speak to me. He did not confide in me. He is a slave. I am a white woman. He would no more have told me he was going to run than he would have told the overseer. I knew nothing." Royston watched her face. She kept her face the way she had learned to keep it. Hours of practice. Years. Royston said, "Cora, I do not believe you." She said, "That is your right. I am going to find out the truth of this. I am going to find out who helped them. If it was you, Cora, the marriage will not happen. If it was you, you will be sent to a place I will not name in front of your father. If it was you, you will not see this county again. If it was you, I will know within a week. Do you understand me?" She said, "Yes." Edmund was crying. Royston said, "Go to your room." She rose. She walked out of the parlor. She climbed the stairs slow. She went to her room. She closed the door. She sat on the edge of her bed. She did not cry. Royston did not find what he was looking for. There was nothing in the house. There was no diary. There were no letters. There was no jewelry in the dressing table because she had only had what she had given away, and Royston did not know what she had had to give. The servants in the house had been told nothing. Joseph had been told nothing. Pritchard had been told nothing. Old Daniel had built the thing carefully, and the only thread that ran through the house was the thread between Isaiah and Cora, and that thread was a thread of looks and a thread of silences and a thread of a few words spoken in a library, and there was no proof of any of it. Royston suspected her. Royston knew. Royston was a lawyer and he knew. But Royston did not have proof. He stayed for 2 weeks. He questioned Joseph. He questioned the field hands who were left. He questioned Cora 3 more times. He found nothing. At the end of 2 weeks, Royston rode back to Richmond. He did not break the engagement. He did not break it because he had been thinking about it the whole 2 weeks and he had decided. If he broke it, he lost the land. If he kept it, he got the land and he got Cora and he got her in his house in Richmond where he could watch her and where he could, over the years, find out the truth and where he could, over the years, deal with her in whatever way he chose. Royston was a patient man. He had waited 2 weeks. He could wait 2 years. He could wait 20. The marriage was still on. The date was still October. Cora was told this in her father's study the morning after Royston left. She listened. She said, "Yes, father." She did not say anything else. She went back to her room. She sat at her desk. She looked out the window. She looked down at the magnolia where she had stood that night and made the small bow. She looked at the empty quarters down the slope. Most of the strong men were gone. Pritchard was riding the gang hard. The fields were thin. The crop would be worse this year than last. Royston would have his work cut out for him when the place came to him. She thought about Isaiah. She did not know where he was. She did not know if he was alive. She did not know if he had made it past the Pennsylvania line. She did not know if Hattie was with him. She did not know if old Daniel had survived the walking. She did not know if she would ever know. She would not ever know. That was the deal she had made. She had given him up. She had given him to a place she could not follow and a future she would not see. She had given him because that was the only way to give him anything at all. The truest gift of her life was a thing she would never get to learn the outcome of. She sat at her desk. She wrote nothing. The wedding was in October, in the parish church in Buckingham County. Cora wore her mother's dress, taken in. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, limping. Royston met her at the front. The minister said the words. She said the words. Royston said the words. They were married. The wedding supper was at the house. Royston's 3 sons came down from Richmond. They were polite to her. They called her cousin. One of them, the youngest, who was 28, looked at her with something close to pity. She did not return the look. In November she moved to Richmond. The house on Franklin Street was tall and narrow and had brass on the door. Royston's 3 sons did not live there. They had their own places. Cora had her own room on the 2nd floor, looking out over a small garden. Royston had his own room on the 1st floor, near his study. He did not come to her room often. He did not come to her room at all in the 1st month. He did not come the 2nd month. He came in February once briefly in a way she would not describe. He did not come again that year. She understood that he had not married her for a wife. He had married her for the land. The land had transferred at the end of October, 2 weeks after the wedding. Edmund had signed it. The mortgage had been cleared. The remaining slaves at Whitfield Hall had been sold off in lots in November and December. Edmund had moved into a smaller house in Lynchburg, with 2 servants and a pension Royston had set up for him. Edmund would die there 4 years later, of the same drinking that had given Cora away, in a room with no books in it. Cora lived in the house on Franklin Street for 31 years. That is the story. But there is one more thing. There is one more thing because every story like this one has one more thing, the way every life has one more thing in it that turns out to be the part that mattered. In the spring of 1858, a year and a half after the wedding, a letter arrived at the house on Franklin Street. The letter was addressed to Mrs. Royston Whitfield. The handwriting on the envelope was careful, deliberate, the handwriting of a person who had learned to write the slow way, by candle stub late at night. There was no return address. Cora opened the letter in the kitchen. She did not open it in the parlor. She did not open it where the housekeeper could see her face when she read it. The letter said this: Madam, I am writing to inform you that the parcel which left Virginia in July of 1856 arrived safely at its destination. All 7 items are well. The old article is in poor repair but functional. The young article is studying letters in earnest. The cook has found work in a respectable establishment. The strong article wishes me to convey to you his enduring respect. He thinks of you often. He says the bow was real. He says he hopes you are well. He does not ask you to write back. He says he would prefer you did not, for reasons you will understand. He sends this letter through 3 hands. He has not put his name on it. Yours in service, a friend. She read it twice. She walked to the stove. She opened the door. She put the letter in the fire. She watched it burn. She closed the door. She walked back upstairs. She sat at her desk. She looked out at the garden. For the first time in 2 years she smiled. It was a small smile. It did not stay long. Nobody saw it. But it was hers. She lived in that house until 1887. She read every book in her husband's library. She outlived Royston by 12 years. He died in 1875 of a stroke at the breakfast table. His sons inherited the house, but they let her stay in it. She kept a small allowance. She read. She did not remarry. She did not have visitors. In her later years, the 2nd eldest of Royston's sons came to call on her one afternoon. He had grown into a kind man, somewhat in spite of his father. He sat with her in the parlor. He asked her how she was. She said, "I am well, thank you." He asked her if she ever thought of going back to the country, to see the old place. She said, "No, there is nothing for me there. There has not been for a long time." He asked her, after a silence, if she had ever been happy. She thought about it. She said, "Once." He waited. She did not say anything more. He did not press. He kissed her on the cheek when he left. He said goodbye in the warm way he had always said goodbye to her, because he was the youngest and he had always been the kindest of the three. She watched him go down the front steps. She closed the door. She walked to the parlor window. She looked out at the street. She thought of a young man with a straw hat and a chain on his wrists, lifting the hat from his head in a Virginia yard 60 miles south of where she was standing, in front of 3 drunk men who had paid good liquor to enjoy a joke that had not landed. She thought, the way she had thought every day of her life since, of the bow. The bow had been the smallest thing. It had also been the biggest thing. It had been the thing. She turned away from the window. She went to her chair. She picked up her book. She read until the light went. That is the story of the crippled daughter and the strongest slave, and the joke that was supposed to be a joke and turned out to be a question, and the question that was supposed to break them and turned out to be the thing that set both of them loose, in their different ways, in the only ways their world had left them, one on a road north in the dark with his mother and an old man and a boy of 14, and one in a house in Richmond, with a window and a book and a small smile that nobody ever saw. The joke was on Edmund Whitfield. The joke was on Royston Whitfield. The joke had never been a joke at all. It had been the day a man in chains lifted his hat to a woman who had never been seen, and a woman who had never been seen looked up, and what passed between them in that one bowed second was a thing that 2 drunk men on a porch did not have the eyes to see, and never would, and never did, and went to their graves having no idea what they had been in the room for. That is the end. That is the whole of it. Stay with the people who bow to you. Bow back. That is the only thing in this story I am going to tell you straight. The rest of it you already knew.